This is To Help You Heal, and I'm your host, Marie Monville. We are going to spend 10 minutes talking about healing. What kind of healing do you need? Is it in your mindset? Is it emotional healing? Is it spiritual healing? You know, there's a lot of healing that we all need, and this is where you're going to find it every week, 10 minutes on Tuesday. I'm so glad you're spending this time with me. Welcome to another episode of To Help You Heal. This week, we are again talking about comeback stories, but we're doing it from a little different perspective. Over the past few weeks, I've walked you through my comeback stories. I've talked about the places in my life where I've experienced hardship and pain and the road that I've traveled since then. The reality is that we all get to write the comeback story in our lives, but we're the ones that have to do it. And this episode is for you. This episode is all about you. It's about you creating your comeback story. And I know maybe you're sitting there listening and you're thinking, you know what, Marie, you have no idea what's going on in my life. And you're right. I don't. I don't know what you're facing right now. But here's what I know. We have the opportunity to rise again. There isn't anything that is the finality of our story. It really doesn't matter how bad it gets. We have the opportunity to come back from it, to rise again, to be resilient, and to find something more than we know right now. And I can say that to you because I found that in my life through otherwise seemingly insurmountable circumstances. If you didn't catch last week's episode or the one before, I would encourage you to go back and listen to those. I share about the loss of my first daughter. She was born at 26 weeks of pregnancy and died 20 minutes later in my arms. I share about my first husband, who was the man that committed the Amish schoolhouse shooting. And honestly, you know, if you had told me before either one of those events that I was going to walk through them, I would have said, there's no way. I'm not strong enough. I can't do this. I'm not capable. Find somebody else. It can't be me. And, you know, at the same time, if you would have also said, but yet on the other side of these stories, you're going to live out something that you're going to love. You are authentically going to be able to stand up in front of people, share your story, and say, I love my life. I wouldn't have thought that that was true either. How could someone go through these circumstances and find a life they love? That's what a comeback story is all about. And it's time for you to have your own comeback story. And, you know, if we want to have a comeback story, it really starts with this place of saying, I'm experiencing this setback. I've gone through this hardship. There's this thing in my life that I don't love. And honestly, friends, we have to start there. We have to be willing to admit that, to own that, to say, I'm just going to tell it like it is. There's this stuff going on in my life that I don't love. We have to start there. We have to be authentic and honest, at least with ourselves, with God, with some close friends, to say, there's this thing in my life that wasn't what I wanted. And I'm battling it out right now. It always starts there because we can't have a comeback story if we're not even willing to admit or acknowledge the fact that we've had a setback. And so maybe that's where you start. Maybe you're starting from that point of saying, you know what, for me, the starting point is acknowledging the pain, is admitting the hard place, of owning it. And it's not owning it in a way that defines us. We're going to talk about that. It's just owning it so that we can move forward. Because we can't move forward if we can't acknowledge the point at which we're starting from. And, you know, it really doesn't matter what the circumstance is. Maybe it's a financial hardship. Maybe it's a strained relationship. Maybe it's the loss of a job or some other kind of personal loss, struggle, you know, with a spouse or with a child, whatever it is. The reality is that we have to embrace it and acknowledge it and give ourselves space to grieve it if we want to move on from there. Because otherwise, if we don't, we're just going to be dragging around this stuff inside with us that we've tried to push down, brush aside, pretend doesn't exist. So let's start there. And then, you know, it becomes this place of what is our mindset telling us? Because our mindset's always going to tell us something. Is our mindset suggesting that we're a victim? Or is our mindset saying that we can grow and learn and change because of this experience, that we can be victorious even in the midst of this thing. Because if we want to have a comeback story, we're never going to write it from the place of victim mentality, of saying, this stuff always happens to me and this is just the way my life goes. When I say that we have to own it and acknowledge it, it's just simply about saying, this is real, this is happening in my life right now, and I'm not going to pretend it's not there. It's not owning it in the sense of, wearing it like a jacket or a blanket or whatever, and letting it be the thing that we live under all the time. That is a victim mentality. And if you're struggling in that place and you're saying, oh my gosh, that's me, I'm walking around in a victim mentality, there is help and there is hope. And it all begins with the shift in your mindset to say, where can I grow through this? What opportunities are there? Looking at these setbacks as experiences and not failures, but having a place of being able to say, I'm going to cultivate resilience. I'm going to lean into belief that I have in myself, places where I can see that I have pushed through, that I have persevered in the past. I'm going to come at it with a positive reference point, a positive outlook on myself. And I'm going to believe that even in the midst of this broken and difficult place, that I'm going to rise again. That's the place that we have to start from, this place of belief. And it doesn't mean that we know all the details or that we have it all figured out. It just means that we're going to say to ourselves, I'm going to stay in a place of a growth mindset. Instead of viewing things as success or failure, I'm going to say, what can I learn here? What can I take away from this? What would I do differently? What would I do the same? Instead of saying, why is this happening to me? Or saying, this kind of thing always happens to me. It's this place where we, instead of focusing on the loss, start to look at it like a lesson and say, how can I become better from this? How can I be a better person? How can I learn to see others and their struggles more? I had a friend that always used to say that your pain becomes your platform. And he was right. It does. And when we can use our pain as a platform, it gives us the opportunity to connect with other people who also know that same place of pain. So we've acknowledged it, we've gotten our mindset right, and then it's time to set some goals. We have to know, where are we going in all of this? What are our short-term goals? What are our long-term goals? What does success even look like for us personally? And then we have to break it down into manageable pieces. And, if you're listening to this and you're wanting to walk through these steps with me, you're going to need to pause this podcast, or you're going to need to listen to it and come back to it, because I do not want you to try to fly through this in the matter of 10 minutes, but to give yourself the grace and the space to find what you need to find and do what you need to do, process where you need to process, and spend time where you need to spend more time. So when you're ready to think about, what does a goal look like? It's saying, where do I want to be in 3 or 6 months from now? We're about 3.5 months from the end of the year. If you're listening to this around the time that I recorded it, that's a perfect opportunity to say, where do I want to be by the end of this year? How do I want to view myself? Where do I want to be in the midst of this journey? And really only setting goals that we are responsible for. Not setting goals that have something to do with another person, because we can't control them, but setting goals that are about us. That's the only way that we're really going to be able to ensure that we get where we want to go. But keep them realistic, make them measurable. Use the SMART goal technique if you want. You can look it up online, SMART goals, SMART, just like it sounds. Reach out to me if you want some help with that. But we have to know where we're going, because if we don't know where we're going, how are we going to know that we're getting the place we want to get? For me, when I was walking through the aftermath of the Amish schoolhouse shooting, I wanted to find this place of healing. I wanted to lead my kids well. Those were my goals. And I had specific ways that I measured that, and I leaned into those places. But if I wouldn't have known where I wanted to go, how would I know if I'm getting there? And then we just have to take it one small step at a time. When we think about goals, I think often we can get really wrapped up in the end point. We want to get to some wonderful, amazing ending. It's not about that. It's just about taking one step at a time, about being consistent in the little things, celebrating our small wins. I'm sure you've heard me talk about that before. Go back to a previous episode if you haven't. Everything that we want to do is all about the consistency of small steps. When I was writing my book To Help You Heal, which this podcast is named after, I wrote every day a little bit here, a little bit there in small chunks. And that's how I wrote the book. I just stayed consistent day after day after day, getting it done. And I didn't always feel like it. I think sometimes we assume that if we're setting goals and working towards things that we're going to feel purposeful and vibrant and all in on it. And we're not always going to feel that way, but it's saying, I'm going to be consistent day in and day out. And I'm not going to focus on perfection. I'm just going to focus on my action. Make your goals about those action steps. Maybe you want to get outside and walk more because it's good for your physical health and your mental health. And so maybe your goal is saying, hey, this week I'm going to take 4,000 steps. And then next week I'm going to take 5,000 steps. And maybe those are your goals, but make them measurable, keep them small, keep them realistic, and just focus on having that place of action. Make sure that you've surrounded yourself with support and accountability. If we have weekly accountability check-ins, we have almost a 95% certainty that we will achieve what we've set out to do for no other reason than we've told somebody else and they're keeping us accountable. It's powerful. Plus, having that support system, there's just nothing like it. I hope that you have that. Find just one other person that you can reach out to. You do that for them, have them do it for you. It's amazing what happens when we have that place of accountability. And then you guys can celebrate each other's progress along the way because you know that I'm all about celebrating our wins. We want to get to that end goal, but the reality is that if we're not consistent in the day-to-day, we're never going to get to the big things and those big finish lines. So celebrate those small moments. Celebrate after the end of a week of, crossing off those things that you wanted to do. Make sure that you are celebrating and acknowledging that every step forward matters. Even if it's that place of saying, hey, this week I'm going to work on shifting my mindset. I am going to work on staying out of that place of victim mentality. And I'm going to ask myself, what can I learn from this? What's my takeaway? How's this helping me be a better version of myself? Because then it's not so much about that goal that feels elusive or really far away. It's about all of the things that are happening right now. And those small wins, they're going to help us stay motivated. They're going to keep us tied in, and they're going to remind us that we are making our comeback. The truth is that your comeback story is yours. You get to write it. It doesn't mean that you have to write it by yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to do it all today, but you do have to take that first step. It doesn't matter how small it is. You just have to take one. You have the strength within you to do it. I know you do. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. And if you need some help with this, if you want some help to write your comeback story, reach out to me. You can send me an email, marie@mariemonville.com. Find me on social media. I would love to partner with you because I believe that everyone deserves to live a comeback story. We all deserve to live a life we love, even when we don't love our circumstances. I believe that because that's what I've seen in my life, and I want that for you too. Come back next week. Join me. We're going to continue the conversation.